So first of all, thank you very much to the whole group here and to the NJTPA for inviting VIA to present this morning. And I saw Mike Manzella's on. Hopefully he can keep me honest on any of the things that I tell you about Jersey City. But we're here today to talk to you about microtransit and how it can be a flexible and equitable public transportation option for New Jersey. Just a brief round of introductions. As you noted, my name is Eric Gardner. I'm also joined by my colleague Arjun, who will be talking at the end of the presentation about specific ways to leverage federal funding for innovative mobility solutions. So today we'll just be going over a brief overview of VIA as a company, also doing a bit of a Microtransit 101. I know some of you have some familiarity with it, but we'll talk about it from a basic level. And we'll talk about Jersey City and a couple other case studies that I think will be informative for the group. And then again, we'll end on talking more about innovative mobility funding. So first to start off, and I'll just say quickly, because of the compressed time, we'll hopefully keep all questions until the end and hopefully have a couple minutes, but the staff can keep me honest on whether we have time for those. Hopefully we will. So VIA is a public mobility company. So we provide transit technology that has built a digital infrastructure that connects everything within a community. We have a software platform that allows our partners first to kind of visualize and analyze and then ultimately plan their own transportation network, and then bring that into to real life with a set of tools that are dispatcher, operator, and rider facing. And then ultimately, we also want to be able to use the data from that service, which we'll go over today, to improve the service and bring it back into the planning environment. And across the globe right now, there's over 600 public entities that are partnered with VIA. So this is across all these locations, we are facilitating 2.5 million shared rides per month. And what's really important here is that each of these dots is different. So the way that, for example, a small rural New Zealand village use VIA's platform is obviously very different than, for example, Jersey City. Each community is very different, and the way they leverage demand response differs for very important reasons. Our VIA's platform is used for everything from fixed route and on-demand transportation planning to on-demand public microtransit, also paratransit and non-emergency medical travel. We also do both fixed route scheduling and work with school buses. So for example, we're working with the Department of Education in New York City across their 10,000 vehicle fleet on both student visibility, but also dynamic routing for pupil transportation. And we also work with large organizations and campuses, such as like Harvard or Stevens Institute of Technology, right there in Hoboken on campus shuttle operations. But today I'll primarily be talking to you about microtransit. So what is microtransit? Right. So at its core, it is a technology-enabled shared ride public transportation mode. So we use routing algorithms and real-time on-the-ground information to group passengers into shared rides. So the experience for a passenger is one where they will call us, hail a ride through a rider-facing application, or call in to book a ride if they need to. And then a driver will be routed to them based not only on real-time traffic, but where other rides are being requested. The rider will be asked to walk a couple hundred feet to a virtual pickup point. They'll take a ride pooled with other passengers, and then they'll be dropped off at a virtual drop-off point, and then walk several hundred feet to their ultimate destination. And where we've seen across globally, really, where microtransit is best used as a complement to fixed route. So I'm going to talk about a couple kind of top-level cases where we see microtransit be an really effective tool for the communities that we work with. The first is where, despite its best efforts, fixed route just can't reach everywhere. So there are gaps where fixed route can't necessarily reach, especially if you think about fixed route as an artery, talking about the capillaries that need to reach into communities. Microtransit has been a really effective way to fill those gaps. It's most effective when it complements the fixed route, especially in terms of first and last mile trips to and from high capacity corridors that have fixed route, for example, bus rapid transit or regional rail. There are certain occasions where there are routes that are underperforming, and if they are equipped with on-demand, you can actually expand the coverage area, increase ridership, and increase quality of service while effectively converting that fixed route to an on-demand zone that encompasses not only the previous route, but the neighboring areas. And then lastly, just as a fundamental mode for communities, this is a very different way for seniors and those with mobility impairments to move around a community as a public mode. And I should note, in that kind of corner-to-corner model that I talked about, where you walk to a virtual bus stop for pickup and drop-off, with those that are mobility impaired, there's always the ability with any well-run microtransit service to provide door-to-door service for those that are mobility impaired, so they don't have to walk that extra amount because they can't in some cases. The way that partners, our communities, be they cities or transit agencies, work to bring microtransit to life is usually one of two ways. They either already have a fleet of vehicles and drivers, and they just need the technology to do dynamic dispatch and routing and turn their network on demand. The other, and this is where we work with some cases, for example, Jersey City, entities that didn't normally operate their own transit before and wouldn't expect to now. We help them provide not only the technology, but also the operations. So this is everything from sourcing the vehicles, providing drivers, doing insurance, fleet maintenance and management, customer service. So basically an end-to-end third-party transit operator for on-demand microtransit. And the way this happens in terms of technology is using 4 cloud-based tools. So first is this rider application, and that's how riders are able to book a ride, have real-time visibility and tracking, and see an ETA, and then also rate their ride afterwards. This is all tracked from an operations center that's also cloud-based that kind of gives any administrative view a system visibility and management function. And then the driver app looks a lot like Google Maps, except that it is layered with 2 additional mapping layers that allow for dynamic dispatch and routing in that particular community. And then, of course, the planning suite remix that we use both for service design and to help our partners just think holistically about how they want microtransit in their communities. Ultimately, any good kind of microtransit provider or partner is also going to provide another set of kind of advisory services alongside these technology tools. And that includes, teams that can allow the partner to most effectively market and acquire riders and gain organic ridership growth over the course of the service. Also, continuing service design work as you think about expanding or changing zones, because at its core, microtransit is supposed to be a very flexible tool and public transit mode. And again, if you are working with any sort of microtransit partner for operations as well, it's important to have one that can handle everything from customer service, fleet management, driver acquisition and onboarding, and ultimately providing those very core and important operations that are critical to a high quality service. So that's kind of just a little bit of a background on VIA and the technology and operations kind of framework that we bring to microtransit. I think the best way to really talk through this is to talk about a very fundamental community that's fundamental to all of Northern New Jersey, and that's our Jersey City on-demand partnership. So just to give like a little bit of background, in 2019, there were some fixed routes that were cut throughout the city. And so especially in the northern and southern areas of Jersey City, there was 2 things that existed. Transit gaps related to getting around the Jersey City within itself in terms of community trips, but also getting first last mile to high capacity corridors that were running into New York, your Journal Squares, your pathways. Those were much diminished. So the city kind of took a step back and said, how can we complement the fixed route that really is running effectively in our central zone? And they talked about doing things like TNC or taxi vouchers. They thought about, should they start their own fixed route? Ultimately, what they settled on was an on-demand microtransit network with these kind of wonderfully Barney purple vehicles that you see here, which are in and of themselves, I think, maybe the best marketing and advertisement for the service in the community. And they started it with a zoned approach where you can go from outer to central or central to outer or anywhere within the outer zone itself. The service has been, I think a massive success. We have over 1 million rides that have been served to date since launching in early 2020, doing about 57,000 rides per month. And I think most importantly, over 300,000 miles of single occupancy vehicle driving were avoided just in Q3 of last year alone. And you can see from this graph, we started at maybe the worst time to start a public transit service maybe since the Spanish flu in March 2020. And we even throughout COVID saw steady growth because this was a lifeline for essential workers to be able to move around the community and get to fixed route. Ultimately, we through rider communication tools and surveys, we determined that weekend service might actually be something that people wanted as well. That grew the service subsequently in mid 2021, and we now reached a point where we're doing over 2,000 rides per day on a normal basis. And again, this is a way for community members to not only close the transit gap to getting to intermodal hubs, but also increase access to jobs and education and critical services that they wouldn't be able to reach without this service. And I think that this is really borne out through surveys we've been able to run with the riders. So you can see over half of the riders are coming from households where income is below 50K, and a very high percentage of female minority riders and those under age 35. So this is very much a public transit mode that is serving not only traditional, what we think of as transit dependent, but also transit choice. There's a whole latent underlying ridership that is tapped into when on-demand's adopted in a community. And for many, it's about the affordability. So this is, again, a ride that is offered in the community for the same fare as you would for New Jersey Transit fixed route, for example. And it's critical because 80% of the riders said that they have saved money by riding this service. It's one of its biggest benefits, especially with the demographics that are using it. And just about half are using the service to connect to existing public transit, especially in that central zone. And again, it's really just making a huge impact for those that would have no other way to get around otherwise. Now, that's a great example. I also want to take this opportunity to walk through two other examples, especially given the wide array of areas that are under NJTPA. Not every place is like Jersey City. And so I wanted to quickly talk about two other partners, Cap Metro in Austin and also King County Metro in Seattle. So in Cap Metro in 2017, you can see this is a very small purple zone down there. They started a pilot that lasted only 12 months. And they wanted to use VIA-powered microtransit to improve an underutilized dial ride service they had. They were able to double ridership. And because of that, took all the data from that 12-month pilot and then went about using that to create a network that spanned the entire northern Austin suburbs to determine where microtransit best served the community across their entire service area. What they ended up doing is growing the service to about 11 different suburban, urban, and rural zones, all of which connect to regional fixed route in different ways. And they're using the same platform to integrate the services across different agencies and operators that Cap Metro uses to serve these different areas. King County Metro is another really interesting example that in 2019, they have several light rail stations that run down. You can see that blue line in the diagram is where King County Metro light rail runs. That's a conduit for a lot of lower income communities that live in South Seattle that also live in neighborhoods that you can't see from here because it doesn't show topography, where it's very hilly. And there were park and ride areas that people, if they had a vehicle, were getting there before 6 a.m. just so they could get a spot to be able to take the train in. We worked with King County Metro to launch a microtransit service that only serves first and last mile connections to light rail. So you can't even get a proposal or a trip unless it ends or begins at a light rail station. This is a service, especially during peak hours, that we've seen incredibly high utilization, up to 15 riders per vehicle hour in some cases. And at its peak was doing about 6,000 rides per week. And they've grown the service to, originally it was only that blue zone you see on the screen. Now they've expanded to both the orange and red zones. And within those, King County Metro is using the microtransit service to serve paratransit riders anywhere within those 4 colored zones. So a really innovative way to serve different types of demand response populations, but with the same fleet. And it's also integrated into the local ORCA regional transit card or fare payment system. So I know very quick, I'd love to answer some questions as well. I really quickly want to turn it over to my colleague Arjun, who's going to walk you through how to think about these different streams of federal infrastructure money that have been announced and how they can be best leveraged for microtransit. Arjun, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Arjun. I'm on the policy team at VIA. And as Eric said, I just wanted to walk through some new programs which can be used to fund on-demand microtransit, along with other services. These are 4 programs that were either released or amended through the recent IIJA that all provide like explicit eligibility for on-demand services. The first I want to talk about is the Carbon Reduction Program, which is a formula stream of funding that is assigned to cities and MPOs. As a whole, the program's about $1.3 billion per year, but it, as you may or may not know, it's sub-allocated to states and MPOs. The Newark, New York section of New Jersey has a sub-allocation of about 13 to 14 million per year for the next 5 years. That's money that can be used for services like on-demand transit explicitly, as well as other things like congestion relief. And because it's sub-allocated, that's money that's specifically sort of appropriated to a certain area and therefore can't be sort of competed against. Another program that hasn't been released yet, but we anticipate releasing in the first quarter of this year is the Congestion Relief Program. Again, there's specific eligibility for on-demand transit. And this is a program that's eligible for areas of the country, urbanized areas of the country greater than 1 million in population. So that would include the Newark, New York metro area and the Philadelphia metro area, although for NJTPA, the former will probably be more interesting. Those are projects greater than 10 million in size, which could fund quite an ambitious regional microtransit service and would be available, again, we anticipate the first quarter of this year. There's also the Rural Transportation Program. Again, as the name suggests, this is available only for rural areas. It can fund on-demand mobility. And in fact, in the past year, USDOT awarded $10 million to North Carolina to set up sort of regional on-demand services in rural areas. So that's a very exciting proposal specifically for rural areas that, as Eric was saying, might not be served by transit. There's also advanced technologies funding across a number of different grants. The most important were probably SMART and what's now called ATTAIN, but was in the past ATC-MTD. And these are pots of money that are available for innovative technologies, including on-demand transit and software and operations associated with that. I'd also just like to call out as well that states are becoming more interested in funding these kinds of projects, including New Jersey. A bill was recently reported out of the Assembly Transportation Committee that provides 10 million in a state grant program for innovative mobility, including on-demand transit. And obviously NJTPA and NJ Transit recently announced 7 million for microtransit projects, which is a development we're very encouraged by. So yeah, if anyone has any questions on those as well, I'd be happy to take them.
And then again, to the group, I know we've been allocated a small amount of time and we're just one piece of your agenda. I'm happy to answer the questions live or in writing as a follow-up to some of the questions that were in the chat. What would work best for you, John?
That's great, Eric. Yeah, first of all, my compliments. You've had some of the most vigorous Q&A popping up in the chat of a lot of presentations that we've had, which means people are really interested and intrigued by what you have to say. What I usually do is first open the floor to members of the board who want to ask questions. And I see Jared posted a question in the chat. Jared, do you want to unmute and ask your question to Eric? Maybe Jared's not able to do that. What Jared posted, Eric, is a question I'll read for everybody. Very interested in the various business models necessary to support this. How is private enterprise leveraged with municipal funding? Is there a sweet spot mix for PPP, public-private partnership?
Yep. So I think what you're alluding to is like, how is this a partnership, right? And so in the Jersey City case, for example, we are a third-party transit operator as well as a technology provider. So the microtransit, just like any other public mode, is a publicly subsidized mode that is offered through contracting for operations and technology for its service. I hope that helps. If you have a follow-up, I'm happy to answer that, Jared.
Let me open the floor to Jared and also any other member of the board that wants to unmute and ask a question to Eric. And then after that, I'll read out some of the questions from the chat.
Chairman Bartlett, if I may, I can maybe add a little more color to our VIA JC program and the tremendous benefits we've seen from it. As Eric talked about, it is serving the exact populations it was designed to serve. And we're seeing really encouraging statistics about the popularity of the service. Just this year, 2022, ridership grew 23% over the ridership that we saw in 2021. And we're up to nearly 5 passenger trips per driver hour, which is really important because, it's being used more as a public transit service and not just, a single occupancy type service for riders to get from point A to point B. I know there's always questions about whether on-demand microtransit sort of cannibalizes existing fixed route transit services. One of the studies that VIA has done over the past year is looking at what percentage of trips could have been served, what percentage of trips taken by our VIA on-demand microtransit could have been served by fixed route. And the analysis found that less than 25% of the trips could have been served by fixed route. So the VIA JC program is really showing that it's enhancing and not taking away from existing fixed route services. So this year, we've actually moved forward with integrating NJ Transit services into the VIA app. So when a rider will request to reach their destination, they'll also, in addition to getting a VIA proposal, they'll also receive a proposal that says what fixed route transit, whether that's bus or light rail, is in the area. So that's now integrated into the app. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about a little bit, I know there was a couple questions about funding. We're really excited that in addition to the funding that the city provides to subsidize the service, we're now seeing a lot of external agencies begin to fund some of these operations. So we received this year a grant from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for $600,000 to further electrify the fleet of our VIA JC vehicles. We also, thank you NJ Transit, we also received this year an NJ JARC grant for $250,000. And maybe Lou can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we are one of the first new recipients of the NJ JARC program in several years. So we're really excited and encouraged by that. And then additionally, as far as private funding goes, our service has generated this year over $100,000 in advertising funding. That's done by screens on top of the vehicle and within the vehicle. And I know that VIA is actively, engaging in a search for like title sponsorship to help offset the cost of the service. And I think most importantly, the program is being recognized. The ITS-NJ named the VIA JC program the Outstanding Program of the Year in 2022. And the program is really helping the city to meet its other goals, specifically in safety. By reducing single occupancy vehicle trips, it's helping the overall safety situation in Jersey City. And we're really excited that this year, the first year, we were able to have 0 traffic fatalities on our city streets. And we think that VIA is a part of that. So I just wanted to add those additional points. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, that actually occurred to me during Eric's presentation, is that the fact that people are able to access a service like this at the first and last mile point is probably reducing pedestrian crossings of roadways and thereby adding to pedestrian safety. So I want to kind of pull together a couple of questions that folks posted as a follow-up to your input, Mike, and I'll let you or Eric or Arjun or whoever respond. And that is, you talked about 5 rides per driver hour. It sounds like that may mean that sometimes you've got multiple riders in a vehicle. Are there security concerns, as some folks have had with Uber and Lyft? What is the cost of a ride and how does that compare with public transit fares? Those are both questions from Sally in the chat. And then I know Neil would want me to ask, Neil asks, does VIA include bike share or scooter share in its services? I would actually add to that, is somebody with a bike or a scooter able to transport that on a VIA vehicle in the same way that they could hopping on the subway or the path?
Great. All great questions, John. I will try to attack those sequentially. So the first question about, I believe, was about the cost per ride. Is that correct? Yeah. So
safety and cost per ride.
Safety of the drivers. Yes. So the way that we're able to operate this is as a transportation network company registered under the state of New Jersey. So whatever screening has to go on for drivers to comply with being having a TNC license, we always adopt as a floor. With partners, we can also provide enhanced driver screening if that's something. For example, we do that with a lot of university populations for safe ride programs. I would say that we have not had a huge problem to date on this, right? When you offer a public transportation system, there are always incidents. I think it's more about how you handle the incident in terms of management for both the rider, most importantly, the rider, but also transparency as the operator back to the city. And so we have a specific mechanism for doing that real time so that the city, in this case, or any partner, is part of the incident response. But the short answer is we've been able to, I think, create some really great job opportunities for Jersey City residents through this, and have not had any huge issues in terms of driver safety. But it's always something also that we would provide training to the driver on before they even take their first shift within the service. In terms of the cost per ride, I believe the most recent figure I have is that across the, this is a thing that we are always trying to drive down ourselves by virtue of the utilization we're able to bring. And to your earlier question, if we're not aggregating riders and there are not multiple passengers per driver hour, then we're not doing our job well. And Mike will keep us honest on that. And it's a mutual metric that we drive towards. But the cost per ride is now, I believe, at $11.61 is the last one. I think that's what we reported to the council in 2021. And so the fare for the ride is $2.50. It also, a slight deviation from that, that's anywhere from the center to the outer or outer to the center. For outer to outer trips beyond that $2.50, it's 50 cents per mile after that. But with the geography of the city, no ride is ever going to cost more than about $5 for a rider. And then what was the last question, John?
Oh, you're testing me. Bikes and scooters.
Bikes and scooters, yes. So in some of our other services, we actually are able to, when you book the ride, you can always say, hey, it's not just me. I have, 2 other people with me, for example, and that would be taken into account in terms of the open capacity in the vehicle. But for example, in we have a service that we run in Utah where you can indicate, I'd like to bring a bike on board. Or in the Utah case, that you can actually bring on skis seasonally because it's, but we can indicate that as kind of something that you'd want to bring, and that can be planned into the capacity for it. In terms of integrating, I think this was another question from the chat too. What's the difference between microtransit and mobility as a service? So mobility as a service, there's a lot of, I think, unuseful jargon, and I'll try and define these a little bit better. So mobility as a service is this idea that you should have an app that shows you every different mode that you could use to go from A to B in one setting. The reality is that by booking a microtransit ride through ride hailing, that's just one mode of kind of, that you could end up using. What we found most useful, instead of kind of a one app to necessarily like rule them all, is if a community, for example, has, as is the case with Jersey City, like a really effective bike share network too, we can indicate those as like points of interest on the rider map. So when the rider pulls up the app and looks at it, they can say, I'm actually gonna bike the last like probably less than a mile. I'll take a ride to this city bike station. we can show those. And we found that to be kind of the most effective way to be able to facilitate that type of like multimodality while using microtransit.